is Tyler Segarra, and today we're going to be looking at the fourth case study, which is going to talk about rule-governed behaviors. A quick introduction. What are rule-governed behaviors? Well, it's an evidence-based intervention type that's used to address problem behaviors in clients. The intervention focuses on teaching the client to identify and respond to environmental cues or rules to modify their behavior, and possibly even engage in a more appropriate alternative behavior as well. Quick information about my client. My client was a 7-year-old male diagnosed with ASD. Some skills that he was verbal. He could mand to peers and to teachers for all of his needs. He had a high level of academic skills, or developmentally appropriate level of academic skills, and he was also able to independently engage and accomplish tasks and classroom activities. The reason that he was receiving services was that he had a strongly reinforced behavior pathway for receiving reinforcement, specifically attention from others. This behavior pathway has been reinforced by home and by school, and the client was unable to functionally engage in many different activities or environments because of the behavior pathways to get attention. We not only worked with this client at, in the school environment and in the clinic environment, but we were also able to work with the client and the parents at home to help all environments learn to not reinforce these negative behaviors that are seeking attention. Some quick information about the behaviors. So the target behavior specifically we are looking at is vocal outbursts. The client would engage in vocal outbursts during the class when the teacher was giving group instructions, or even when the students were engaging in independent work. The function was to gain attention, specifically attention from peers. Some other responses that fall under the similar class is hitting the table during the class, also poking peers to get their attention, making jokes, specifically making jokes at an inappropriate time when the teacher's talking again, or when they're all engaging in that independent work. At the bottom here, I listed a operational definition for the behavior. The intervention that we decided to use was, of course, for this intervention, a rule-governed behavior. We were able to allow the client to engage in a more appropriate alternative to gain peers' attention, also a more reinforcing behavior to gain peers' attention, by allowing the client to play a game with peers after he filled out a token board for sitting in class and engaging in his academic tasks appropriately. The way that the tokens were added would be every 5 minutes of appropriate behavior in class, he gets 1 token. When the client got 5 tokens, he was allowed to ask a peer if they wanted to play with him until he got a peer to play with him. If the first peer said no, then he could ask another peer. If the client did not engage in the appropriate behaviors for 5 minutes, then the client had a token removed from his token board. some factors that went into this intervention. Well, one of them was the reinforcement contingencies. They were implemented and explained as we were implementing the intervention, and as well, even before we implemented the intervention, we wanted to ensure there was understanding of the reinforcement contingencies. When the student followed the rules by engaging appropriately, they were able to gain access to a token. Verbal praise was faded out, but initially was presented with each token and then only upon the completion of the token board. And then the tokens, of course, provided that reinforcement throughout the time to engage with peers. The outcome, well, the intervention was a success as the client became more motivated to seek out the appropriate attention-seeking behaviors by earning the tokens so that he could ask a friend to play with him rather than just get that momentary attention from the peers when he engages in some of those maladaptive behaviors during his class. And finally, let's take a look at some obstacles. You can see I wrote several down here for you guys to look at, and you guys can kind of take a look at a lot here. I just made a list of some obstacles that occurred. The big ones especially were those ones that were more prevalent. At times there was, as you see right below obstacles, a lack of MO. When the client didn't have, his most preferred peers in the classroom that day, or possibly when the client became satiated with playing the games available in the classroom, the client would begin to engage in those same behaviors because that offered more reinforcement than waiting to play with peers. To combat that, we were able to go ahead and change the games that he could play with in the classroom, and even we were able to allow the client to be able to exit the classroom for a certain amount of time in order to gain that reinforcement and play outside of the classroom. The environment was also distracting at times, and that, of course, distracted the client from the token board and sometimes would lead to that maladaptive behaviors. We were able to put visual cues all around to go ahead and help the client remember that even if we are distracted, we're still going to behave appropriately. You can see fidelity and therapists are to the right of obstacles. That's one big challenge and big obstacle that any BCBA or BCBA candidate or whoever might be trying to implement an intervention. That's one big one that they'll all run into. I'm sure you guys are aware of that as well, that the therapists need to be running that exact same intervention. So at our clinic especially, we have a morning therapist from about 8 to 12, and then 12 to 4 we have an afternoon therapist. And so each client's getting 2 different therapists in the day, and it works great to go ahead and teach that generalization and teach them to be able to respond to different adults. But also sometimes, especially when we're doing more complex interventions such as this one, or ones that have a longer task analysis attached to it, we might find that the therapists are implementing the intervention a little differently. And so really taking the time to train the therapist and taking the time to answer their questions, and especially if possible, train the therapists together so that if they have any questions, both therapists could hear the question and the answer, and really just improve that fidelity across the morning and the afternoon treatment. Well, I'll leave you to look over this just for a little bit longer, but I hope you enjoyed the 4th and final case study. Thank you so much for coming along. Have a great day.